Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Gandora deck profile, and I'm really excited to do this one because this is actually a Patreon request deck profile by Izzy. So Izzy asked me to make a deck that could summon out Gandora with the greatest of ease, and I think I've actually achieved that with this deck because it actually can summon some really insane 10,000 B-Sticks, can summon Gandora, Gandora X, and when Gandora Giga Ray, you can actually throw it in here when it's released into the TCG as well, which is really cool. You can incorporate all the Gandora cards into this one build, and it is really good. It's really insanely good and can summon out some insane tech cards that I'm playing in this deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell next to you, become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below where you have all those awesome rewards you guys, like getting your name description every single video, getting signed cards in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands just like Izzy did. And definitely give Izzy some love down in the comments as well for requesting this particular deck. So without further ado guys, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing two copies of Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction. So Gandora is a really cool card in this deck because it has the ability that this card cannot be special summoned. You have to pay half your life points as soon as this card touches the field, and then you destroy or you remove from play all the cards on the field. You destroy and then remove them from the field, and then this card gains 300 attack for each card destroyed in this way, and then you send this card to the graveyard during the end phase of the turn. This card can get really big and can be really good to be able to just blow board and just can get you some really good card advantage, especially if your opponent doesn't have a response to this card. It's really easy to actually summon this card in this deck because you can just throw out so many monsters that the tribute summon and the normal summon in this deck is not that important outside of using it for Gandora. We then play three copies of Gandora X, the Dragon of Demolition. Gandora X is arguably a better card, and the one that I go for in the particular deck more often, because when this card is normal or special summoned from your hand, you can destroy as many other cards on the field as possible, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest original attack on the field among those destroyed monsters. And your choice if it's a tie, and the attack of this card becomes the damage inflicted to your opponent by this effect, and then once per turn during your end phase, half your life points. That's totally fine. I don't really care if my life points are half, because when I summon this card, it's gonna be game. Because if it goes off and it destroys all the monsters on the field, usually it's coming out with upwards of 10,000 attack points to go ahead and just deal with my opponent. We then play three copies of Eater of Million. Eater of Million is really good in this deck because you're mainly trying to throw out 4 monsters on your side of the field, go into Yugioh, and then use the Yugioh to go into your Gandora X, which is really cool. But this card basically lets you banish 5 cards from your hand, field, and your extract, special summon this card to your side of the field, and it gains 100 attack for each face down banished card, which is a really good effect just to be able to get that. And then once per turn at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can banish this card, you can banish that opponent's monster face down. But this card cannot be used for the use of a fusion, synchro, or XZ play, which is not that big of a deal because we're just going to use it for a link play. We then play three copies of Gizmek Orochi, the Sky Serpentron Sky Slasher. This card is really good because you banish the top 8 of your deck to be able to special summon this card to your side of the field from your hand or graveyard, and also you can banish the top 3 from your extra deck face down, and then target a card your opponent controls and destroy it, which is a pretty good effect that just destroys a monster to be able to banish additional cards to feed your Eater of Millions and one of the other cards that we're playing in the deck. We then play 2 copies of Destiny Hero Malicious. Malicious is really good in the deck. Yes, you will be banishing a lot of cards in this deck, but that's okay because Malicious is going to be able to go off sometimes. And when you do banish it, you usually banish both copies of it, so it's totally fine. Or you're going to go off with your Malicious before you start banishing everything. So you kind of got to play smart when you use Malicious. We then play 2 copies of Plague Spreader because I do synchro summon pretty easily in the deck, and it's really good to use this card as a material to go into Yugioh. You play a single copy of Armageddon Knight, which is one of the only normal summons that you actually have in the deck, because you can normal summon the Armageddon Knight to your side of the field to send a copy of Malicious to the graveyard to be able to banish it to give you 2 monsters on your side of the field. And if you already have the Gizmek and the Eater of Millions, then you're already set to go into Gandora X, which is really cool. We then play 3 copies of Raiden, Hand of the Lightsworn. Raiden is really good because Raiden can mill the top 2 off your deck and then let you, at the end phase, mill 2 more, which is a really good effect. We play 3 copies of Lumina to revive the Raidens, which is really cool. And plus, this this is a chaos deck as well, so the light monsters super help out, because as you notice, all of these are dark on the top row, where all the ones on the bottom are light. We then play 3 copies of Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning. Now, the really cool thing is you can actually interchange this out. I wanted to make this deck extremely customizable to the way that you wanted to play it. So you could change out your copy of BLS for Chaos Emperor Dragon if you want to play that instead. Or when Gandora Giga Ray comes out, you can change out the 3 copies of BLS for 3 copies of Giga Ray instead, which is really cool. We then play for my personal secret tech of the deck. We're going to be playing 3 copies of Grand Manjin Da-Iza. This card is really, really good in this deck because this card this card's attack and defense of this card becomes the number of your cards removed from play times 400, which is a really insane effect. Just to be able to have this card go all the way up. Like, you banish a copy or use Pot of Desires and you banish 10, this card goes immediately to 4,000. You banish off of Eater of Millions your entire 15 card extra deck, this card immediately goes up 15 times 4, which is right at 6,000. You resolve both of them, this card is at 10,000 for 25 cards being banished. This card is really, really good in the deck, and a really insanely good card in the deck just to be able to summon, because if you don't get the Gandora off, you're going to use Da-Iza on your side of the field to just OTK your opponent with this insane board, or use Eater of Millions. Your boss monsters are essentially Gandora X, Gandora, Eater of Millions, the Grand Manjin Da-Iza, and your copy of BLS they're going to be able to use in this particular deck. And then you use the BLS and the Gizmek to overlay into rank 8 plays. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Foolish Burial. So Foolish Burial is going to be able to send the exact card that you need to the graveyard right when you need it. Like, for instance, a copy of Plague Spreader, Gizmek, Orochi, or your Malicious to the graveyard when you need it. Or even Raiden if you have a copy of Lumina in hand that you just want to get it back to mill 2. 3 copies of Desires. I know, 3 copies of Desires. Why am I playing 3 Desires in this deck? Well, Desires is actually really good because you can banish 10 to feed your copies of your Eater of Millions, to feed your copy of Grand Manju, and just be able to feed a lot of your cards to gain attack points and to let you draw 2. Even if it gets ashed, you're just getting a lot of cards out of the deck to be banished. So this card is nothing but pluses in this particular deck. We then play 3 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade. Charge of the Light Brigade mills 3 off the top of your deck, and then you get to add a Light Sworn level 4 lower monster from your deck to your hand, which is either Lumina or Raiden. And then we play 3 copies of Solar Recharge as well, because you do have 6 targets in the deck to be able to draw 2 and mill 2, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Trade-In as well. Trade-In is really good in the deck because Trade-In is going to help you out overall, get your plays rolling, because you can send your Gizmek Orochi from your hand to the graveyard, and it's not even like you're not even losing anything because it can special summon itself from the graveyard. So Trade-In is really good in this deck because you can just banish the top 8 off your deck after you've drawn 2 and discarded your Gizmek. So it's basically a +1 in this deck because your Gizmek Orochi is still live in the graveyard. We then play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness because the deck is primarily dark. Like, you only play 9 light monsters and the rest of it is just completely dark. So the copies of Allure is really good in this deck to be able to just get you those additional plays to draw 2 and then banish a dark monster in your hand, which is again going to feed your other cards in the deck to banish cards. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So basically for the spells, you're just playing draw cards, which is going to basically help you out with the consistency of getting into your copy of Gandora. So for the extra deck is actually insane. So we're going to be playing a single copy of Yugioh. Yugioh is really good in the deck because of its number 4 and 3 effect. When you use 3 monsters and material to summon this card, you can special summon a monster in your hand, which can be Gandora X, which then can resolve, blow board, and then essentially if you play your cards right, it can FTK your opponent, which is really cool. And then if you have 4, then when this card is link summoned, you can draw 4 cards and then place 3 on the bottom of the deck in any order that you want, which is really good just to be able to get those cards out of your hand and put them back. Like, for example, if you have a Malicious and you know you haven't banished Malicious, then it's totally fine just to summon this to your side of the field, put the Malicious back, and then use another means to get 1 out of the deck, and then banish it to get another card on your side of the field. So this card is really, really, really good at getting your plays rolling in the deck. And basically the end all of the combo is to get a Yugioh and a copy of your Gandora X in your hand with Da-Iza on field, because then you can summon the Gandora X, pop field, and then it'll inflict however much damage the Da-Iza had, which is pretty cool. We then play a single copy of Topologic Zero Boros. Zero Boros is really good because you play so many banished cards in the deck that this card points to gains 200 attack for each of the banished cards, which is pretty cool that it just gains 200 attack for every single banished card, which is just an amazing effect. We then play a single copy of Nightmare Unicorn. Nightmare Unicorn is really good to bounce stuff. Your copy of Phoenix is good to pop spells and traps. Needle Fiber is really good, which is really, really good in this deck to be able to link summon and go into your copy of, say, for example, summon out your copy of Plague Spreader and then use Plague Spreader as a material to go into this. And then you use Raid and to special summon out of the deck, and then use Raid and effect to mill 2, which is still pretty good to get that effect. Or excuse me, you can't use Summon Raid and you have to summon Plague Spreader because this card has to special summon a level 3 or lower tuner monster. We use Raiden to go into Plague Spreader and then link these two away and go into your copy of, say, Nightmare Unicorn, which will get you an additional play to bounce something, and then your copy of your Plague Spreader can come back to the field. We then play the same copy of Masquerena because it can help you go into your copy of Unicorn during your opponent's turn, or go into your copy of Zeroboros as well, which is super nice. One copy of Beals, which this card actually lives through a Gandora, which is really cool. Summon this, and then your opponent will not have much outs to this at this point. Like if you blow board with Gandora, and then you have Beals and Gandora on your side of the field, you probably won at that point. We then play a single copy of Borreload Savage. Borreload Savage is really easy to go into in this deck, and it gives you multiple negations. You play a single copy of Michael the Arc Lightsworn, because this card is, again, really easy to go into in this deck, and it lets you banish a card. One copy of F.A. Dawn Dragster, because it can give you the spell and trap negations, which is really good. One copy of number 38, spell negations as well, and you can use it with your number 97 to be able to get you a 9,000 beat stick in the form of number 100, which is really cool to be able to detach a material off of two materials off of this, special summon both of these to your side of the field, overlay the copy of number 38 with the 100, detach the number 38, and then since you have a 1 and an 8 on your side of the field for rank, this card goes up to 9,000, which is really good. One copy of Minerva, the Exiled Lightsworn, because it can get you additional mills. I don't summon it that much in this deck, but it does come up from time to time where you'll actually use this card. And then a single copy of number 60, because you can draw 2 and discard 1. You can also special summon a monster in the graveyard in defense mode by but you have to skip certain things, but usually this card is going to be really helpful to be able to get your copy of Gandora back from the graveyard, which is going to be super helpful if you mill it off of a certain card. This card is kind of like an out to getting your Gandora back, which is super nice. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it, Izzy. This deck is really fun. I really put a lot of time into this one because this deck is really insane. And you always love the insane decks when I build them for you, and I'm really excited to build this one because this deck is really cool the way that it actually functions and just blows board and just surprises your opponent. It's one of those decks that you see replays of and it's like, that's not practical, but it is. This deck is extremely practical in the way that it functions to be able to get your copy of your Gandora X on your side of the field to blow board, and you can even FTK with this deck. Like, it's really easy to just go in with this deck and just completely blow board and summon a 10,000 beat stick and then blow it up with your copy of your Gandora X and then be able to essentially win, which is really cool. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it because it's a really cool deck, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.